Hi everyone, Lord of the Lego here, and I want to talk about a Lego theme that deserves a shot at being remade by Lego. One that captured the imagination of many people in the 90s and still holds our attention to this day. I'm of course talking about the 1999 theme Lego Rock Raiders. A very unique theme that unfortunately didn't sell well enough to last another couple of years, even with a video game to back it up. But many people, myself included, still love. Some people don't know this, but Rock Raiders was originally going to be a space sub-theme where the Rock Raiders team was going to be battling the insectoids for the crystals, which the insectoids theme also had, although in the final product, Rock Raiders used a trans-green version of the hydrolator crystals from Aquazone, and the insectoids ended up using an entirely new mold for their crystals. Personally, I'm glad they scrapped this idea and just made Rock Raiders its own theme altogether, because it makes them more unique. But that's not all. According to the 1999 Ultimate Lego book, the dark subterranean setting of Rock Raiders was inspired by the Dinotopia books by James Gurney, a series that I grew up with and still enjoy, especially the book The World Beneath. It's because of the whole cavernous aesthetic in that story. If you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. I could also see some influences from other sci-fi mediums. For example, Star Trek, because the LMS Explorer, their main ship, had a teleporter that they used. I wouldn't be too surprised if they were also inspired by other science fiction movies like James Cameron's Aliens and Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, because they also have that rough, gritty, dystopian kind of setting that you can tell from the sets themselves. If you look at any sets in the Rock Raiders line, you'll notice printed bricks with the black and yellow caution stripes like you usually see, but most of them are printed to look like they're all chipped and faded, like the machines are rougher and older and have seen a few years of use already. Sure, they didn't have the most complex builds because of the time they were designed in, but they got the point across fairly well. The LMS Explorer even looks kind of like the type of ship you'd see in a James Cameron film. Type of roughshod, all-business freighter, like the Sulaco or the Nostromo from Aliens. I could see other ships of this type being commissioned for something like terraforming to build new human colonies on other worlds, like the off-world colonies they mentioned in Blade Runner, and I love that idea. This kind of setting makes Rock Raiders all the more unique, because I haven't seen this kind of aesthetic used in LEGO before or since. It implies that this is a type of dystopian cyberpunk future where the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I like that. The reason why dystopian futures appeal to me more than utopian ones like Star Trek, where everyone gets along, there's no world war, you don't even use money, is because they're more realistic than Star Trek. I like the idea that in the future technology advances, but our culture doesn't. Leaving all the same social and political issues to get worse. Problems like poverty and oppression and overall warfare and things like that. And inequality, all sorts of things. Because that's really how things work in the real world. Rock Raiders definitely seems to be from a future like this based on the aesthetics, and I'd love to see something like this being portrayed by LEGO again someday. As for the story, it's a pretty interesting kind of survival-based sci-fi story. The Rock Raiders are this team of miners traveling through deep space when they suddenly end up caught in this particularly dangerous asteroid field that batters the Explorer, heavily damaging it and shutting off the artificial gravity. Then, as if things couldn't get much worse, they get sucked through a wormhole and get shot off into an entirely different galaxy altogether. The Explorer exits the wormhole running purely on emergency power and unable to return to Earth due to the distance from our solar system, leaving the Rock Raiders cut off from any kind of assistance and without the necessary power to return home. They then teleport down to an uncharted planet, named Planet U, which I'm guessing stands for unknown or uncharted since they never told us in story. After scanning the area and locating enormous amounts of brickomium, the crystal fuel they have to mine to power their ship, they build up their bases and mine the entire planet for crystals to power up their ship and get back home. Already, we have an interesting story that focuses on teamwork, survival, and compassion, since they would have to work together, even though it's likely they probably wouldn't get along sometimes. If the emergency power gives out, they're all sunk, so they have to mine for brickomium and transport the crystals back to the Explorer to charge up the engines, until they have enough power to enter light speed and get back home. all of it on a world where they could die, from everything from cave-ins to getting washed out by molten lava to getting killed by rock monsters, or even dying of infectious diseases from the unknown landscape. Kind of like early American settlers. The dominant indigenous creatures are made of this very minerals they inhabit and can become extremely aggressive if crossed. And even though the other creatures aren't as aggressive, like the slimy slugs and the spiders, the slimy slugs eat braconium, bats can chase you out of areas and bite you, the snakes could be venomous, and the spiders are slippery and dangerous to step on in a world where the ground is solid rock that could break your arm if you land on it. This kind of survival story hasn't been done by LEGO before or since, and it's awesome. It really gives off this feel that if they don't get out of there, it's possible they won't live to tell anyone about it, but that's just the story. Now let's talk about the characters. The characters of Rock Raiders are the third ever LEGO characters given whole backstories, names, and overall individuality, next to time cruisers and adventurers. They also fit the dystopian setting because of the aesthetics of their features and uniforms. For example, Chief has a mechanical arm, which I'll get into later. Sparks looks like he hasn't shaved in a while, and even their clothes give off this kind of vibe, with their uniforms being different colors and having all kinds of equipment hanging off of them, kind of looking like they've been cobbled together from whatever materials they had around and gathered whatever they needed to survive. This really fits this dark, futuristic aspect of the series, and I think that for the time they were made, and they really convey this setting well. Now let's get into the characters themselves from the official descriptions given by LEGO themselves. Chief, leader of the Rock Raiders, appeared in only one set, but this guy has a lot of history. According to an official comic, he's a veteran miner who left his left arm in a mining accident, saving 37 trapped miners on Pluto. Now replaced with a prosthetic that can turn into a plasma cannon. I can see this guy as being the type of person who values every member of the team, and I wouldn't be too surprised if Chief works independently as a miner in the story. I can see him leaving the corporation he used to work with after seeing such disregard for safety, and later buying the Explorer to work freely, like Captain Malcolm Reynolds from Firefly, especially since official information mentions that he's lived on the ship for about 20 years. And pretty much his home now. Axel, driver of the team, was said to be champion of the LEGO Racers circuit. Known for being kind of reckless, he often drives hard and fast in most situations and can often get into trouble, although he can defend himself. I can see this guy as being kind of the new guy on the team, having just recently signed on because of his former driving experience. There was also a joke in one of the older LEGO Mania magazines that he had considered dentistry before going into mining. He also enjoys jokes and humor, and I can see this guy as being kind of a prankster on the ship. The comic relief that keeps everyone smiling in a bad situation. Bandit, the team's aquatic expert and helmsman, is usually the one operating boats and other kinds of aquatic vessels like the Rapid Rider. According to the official information, he doesn't tolerate people messing around, and usually gets annoyed to the point of growling for hours whenever that happens. As such, he doesn't get along with Axel very well. Personally, I could see this guy as being either Russian or German based on his description, and the minifigure looks like somebody who could be stocky and muscular in real life. He's described as being shaky on land, but still clever enough to sneak past rock monsters and is head navigator on the team. Jet, one of my favorite characters, is a former Air Force ace, mentioned to be one of the bravest and strongest-willed of the Rock Raiders. She's an expert pilot who can fly any kind of airship the Rock Raiders own, and can take on any challenge she faces with problem-solving skills. To me, she sounds a little like Kaylee from Firefly, based on her personality. And I wouldn't be too surprised if Joss Whedon is a LEGO fan who was partly inspired by characters like her. I could really see the two of them getting along if anybody thinks of a crossover between the two themes. Doc, the team geologist and commander on the Explorer, is apparently the calmest member of the team, often fully assessing a situation before acting. This leads to him being able to think his way out of any situation, although this can be a disadvantage that he tends to spend too much time thinking things out sometimes. Doc is also the explosives and demolition expert and a keen explorer. Because of this, I could see him as being Australian, which could fit his general appearance, with a little mustache and everything. It is also mentioned that as commander of the Explorer and a good friend as Chief, he is also the only member who knows Chief's real name. Sparks is Rock Raider's engineer, very talented, but also very clumsy. He's known for taking things apart and kind of forgetting to rebuild them. but is one of the most skilled engineers available. He apparently drinks a lot of coffee and is apparently angered, according to official mini-comics, and is also skilled with explosives. I can see this guy is coming from this farming family, heading off-world to find some better job experience, wanting some kind of adventure like Luke Skywalker from Star Wars. Mostly due to the fact that he looks sort of rough and rugged, kind of farm kid look. LEGO had never given most of their characters names and personalities like this before, and just the little they gave us gives me, and likely other LEGO fans, a lot of material to work with. Before the early 2000s, LEGO left most of the personalities of their characters blank. Even characters like adventurers only had some of the main characters given their personality, with some of the villains given somewhat minimal backstories. Before the early 2000s, they left most of the personality characters blank, but I do like how they started making more detailed backstories to their characters and the themes I mentioned at the beginning of the video. It shows how they were growing as both a toy company and as story writers, and these days, almost every character they invent has this much depth and backstory to them, which all started with this theme. Rock Raiders itself only lasted about a year or two, with a couple of sets made in 2000, but it had a lot to go on. Sure, the sets weren't the most complex, but that's mostly a sign of the time that they were made in. You know, that juniorization using much bigger pieces to kind of reduce the part count. If it were made today, I could see them kind of adding all sorts of little details they couldn't with the constraints they had in the 90s. They would make all sorts of complex things, like spinning drills that would move when you push the vehicles around. The more detailed sets with little pieces and more intricate details like onboard computers, detailed seating, little tools like fire extinguishers and wrenches in the cockpits for repair. They could even give Chief an actual mechanical arm with that cyborg piece they use today. You know, that prosthetic arm piece they use today. Also, one of my favorite YouTubers, Nick on Planet Ripple, pointed out that usually the color scheme of gray and brown with teal and yellow detailing wouldn't work out, because color theory states it would be an absolute mess to look at. But the designers of the sets managed to make it work out really well. I never thought of that beforehand when I saw that video. Check out his channel if you want. Check out his channel, it's great. He brings out some really cool points about it. And I see these sets with a reverence that I never had before now. Another thing that's more unique about Rock Raiders. Good job, designers. Not only that, but it became so popular that even decades after it was made, there are now fan forums like Rock Raiders United dedicated to it. There are dozens of fan creations based off of Rock Raiders, and even music videos and other tributes on YouTube. Apparently there was also some kind of weird, obscure Japanese merchandise that some fans have found. See, like these, for example. There's mugs, CD cases, sticker sheets, even a headlamp. I'll show you some pictures of them. So you got a sticker sheet, this CD case, this little headlamp, and a couple of keychains. Yeah. Pretty big. For a theme that only lasted about a year, it's really big. So, yeah. In an age when most LEGO themes at that time barely saw most popularity besides toy sales, Rock Raiders really blew us away with how unique of a setting it was. It wasn't officially a space theme, but it may as well have been one because of its sci-fi setting. And if it had been, it would have been one of the most unique themes LEGO ever made, especially given its dark dystopian aesthetic. And yes, LEGO did make Power Miners in 2009 and 2010, and although I never actually bought any of those sets, I can see the potential in them. The drill and wheel pieces look perfect for this kind of theme, and I think that if Rock Raiders were made today, it would be built with the same kind of mechanics and functions, just with the darker color scheme, grittier setting, and detailed characterization that Power Miners lacked. Here's hoping that someday we can get another sci-fi theme that hits us such a strong level as Rock Raiders did in the 90s, and hopefully last at least a couple years before bowing out completely. This is Lord of the Lego, signing off.